Throughout MLB history, there have been just over 2,000 All-Stars, and as a result, many of them are eventually forgotten by most fans. So today, I'll be highlighting some of the most overlooked All-Stars of the 2010s. Players who were once among the best in baseball, yet have now completely disappeared from the spotlight. But just how good were these players actually? Why did their careers end? And most importantly, where are they now? Starting off with Matt Harvey, who for a short period of time was one of the most exciting pitchers in baseball. He was 6'4", could throw up to 98 miles an hour, and was nothing short of dominant. So what happened to Matt Harvey, and why did his dominance only last a couple of years? Well, we first need to go back to 2012, a season in which the Mets would lose their two best starters, R.A. Dickey and Yohan Santana. But it wouldn't take long for the team to find their newest ace. Matt Harvey made his first career start in July, setting a franchise record for the most strikeouts in a debut with 11. And during his first full season in 2013, he would put up unbelievable numbers. In April, he was named the American League Pitcher of the Month after going 4-0 with a 1.56 ERA. And in May, he was featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated before being named the starting pitcher in the All-Star game. Harvey had quickly become a superstar in New York, with each of his starts drawing massive crowds despite the team's struggles. And when looking at his numbers, it's easy to understand why. He completed the season with a 2.27 ERA and 191 strikeouts, earning himself a 4th place finish in Cy Young voting. Now, over the offseason, Harvey had to undergo surgery on his throwing arm, causing him to miss the entire 2014 season. Yet, when he returned in 2015, he picked up right where he left off, recording a 2.71 ERA and leading his team all the way to the World Series. So, even though they ended up losing in 5 games, it seemed like Harvey was the future of the Mets. But this was far from what actually happened. Over the next few years, his numbers would drop off significantly, and injuries became more and more frequent. Not to mention, he would start making headlines for all the wrong reasons, like in 2017 when he was suspended after not showing up for practice. So, just 3 years after his great season in 2015, the Mets made the difficult decision of releasing Harvey. And following short stints with the Reds, Angels, Royals, and Orioles, he would finally retire in 2023. His rapid decline and eventual fall-off was almost unbelievable, considering just how good he was in his first few seasons. But looking back, it makes sense why this happened. In 2022, Harvey admitted to repeated drug use throughout his career during the trial for the death of his former teammate Tyler Skaggs. But to make things even worse, he also admitted that he provided drugs to Skaggs during his time on the Angels. This was devastating news for his fans, and Harvey later said this when looking back on his career. Between the injuries and I think me getting in my own way and causing some of those problems, I feel for the fans that maybe I let them down. Today, Harvey is a senior vice president of sales at an insurance company, and he hopes to stay involved with the Mets going forward. But unlike Harvey, this next player never really spent any time in the spotlight. Throughout the 2010s, Shin-Soo Choo was quietly one of the best all-around players in baseball, and for almost a decade, he was consistently one of the most productive hitters on whatever team he was playing for. Yet, despite this, his talent was never widely recognized, and for that reason, I believe that he's one of the most underappreciated players in recent history. But what made him so good? And why isn't he talked about more amongst fans and the media? Well, to fully understand his story, we have to go back to the year 2000, when he first came to the US. Choo was just 18 years old when he left South Korea and signed with the Mariners out of high school. And at first, he had basically nothing, making just $350 a week while living across the world from his home. But he was determined to follow his dream, and after 4 years in the minor leagues, he finally made his debut in 2005. However, even after reaching MLB, Choo's playing time was extremely limited. You see, the Mariners already had plenty of talent in the outfield with players like Ichiro, making it difficult for Choo to get experience. So in 2006, he was traded to the Indians, where he would finally get the opportunity to prove himself. In 2008, he became the American League Player of the Month in September after hitting for an average of 400 with 5 home runs. This remarkable performance would earn him a starting spot in the lineup in 2009, before emerging as the most productive player on the entire team. He would finish that year as one of just 4 players in MLB to hit over 300 with 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases. Not to mention, his defense in right field was also extremely impressive, as in 2010 he led MLB with 14 outfield assists. Chu was the definition of consistency in every aspect of the game, making him a true 5-tool player. Though, unfortunately, the Indians were simply not good while Chu was on the team, causing his talent to fly under the radar for most fans. However, other players took notice fairly quickly, and in 2011, they voted Chu as the most underrated player in MLB. In 2012, Chu was traded to the Reds, where he would have yet another great year before signing a 7-year deal with the Rangers. And at $130 million, this became the largest contract for an Asian-born player in history, at least at the time. Although, his time in Texas would be a series of ups and downs. In 2014, injuries caused him to miss a significant amount of games, and as a result, he put up the worst numbers of his career. His best season with the Rangers wouldn't come until 4 years later, when his skill would finally be recognized on a national scale. In the first half of 2018, Chu hit 18 home runs and recorded an OPS over 900, leading to his very first All-Star selection at 35 years old. During that same year, he would become the all-time leader in home runs among Asian-born players. Now, despite getting offers to continue playing in MLB, he eventually opted to return home and finish his career in South Korea, where he would play for the next 3 years before finally retiring at 41 years old. Throughout his career in MLB, Chu was never a player that drew much attention outside of the team he was playing for. But when looking back, it's hard to find many players that were as consistent as he was. Not to mention, Chu was also a beloved teammate who always gave back and looked out for the people around him. In 2020, Chu donated almost $200,000 to players in the Rangers farm system, saying this: "I don't want these guys worrying about money. 20 years ago when I came from Korea, I had nothing. Baseball gave me a lot of things. I want to pay back to other people." He continued this trend when he donated over half of his Korean salary to charity, despite being the highest paid player in league history. As a Rangers fan, Chu was always one of my favorite players during his time in Texas, and to this day, he remains as one of the most underrated stars of the last 2 decades. But what happens when a young star completely destroys their reputation just 4 years into their career? Well, before I get into that, I want to give a quick thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Arena Club. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with collecting baseball cards, and I still have a binder full of them that I've kept ever since. And now, with slab packs from Arena Club, I get to relive that same excitement of opening packs and collecting my favorite players. With slab packs, it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. And what's great about Arena Club is that they're completely transparent, showing you every card that's available and their hit rates. As a Rangers fan, I was happily surprised when I got one of my favorite players, Evan Carter, in my very first pack. And as you can see, Arena Club will instantly give you an offer for 90% of the card's market value that you can accept on the spot. So whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club makes card collecting easy and fun. Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/average and using code AVERAGE. The next player I want to talk about is Addison Russell, who was drafted 11th overall in 2012 and quickly became one of the most promising young stars in baseball. In fact, one scout even said this about his playstyle: "There aren't many guys who have no obvious weaknesses, and that's what you get in Russell." In just his first season in 2015, he became the starting shortstop for the Cubs, replacing 3-time All-Star Starlin Castro. His biggest strengths were his speed and defense, allowing him to make incredible plays on the field. But in 2016, he displayed massive improvements at the plate and became a key component in an already stacked lineup. Over the course of that year, he hit 21 home runs and was voted as the starting shortstop in the All-Star game. Though, most notably, Russell played a key role in the Cubs' historic World Series championship. In Game 6, he hit a grand slam and tied the record for the most RBIs in a World Series game. So, after becoming an All-Star and a World Champion at just 22 years old, it seemed like Russell had an extremely bright future ahead of him. However, in the years following these achievements, his career would begin a downward spiral. In both 2017 and 2018, his numbers would fail to live up to expectations. But yet, this was the least of his concerns, because in September of 2018, Russell was suspended by MLB following allegations of domestic abuse from his ex-wife.
I really don't want to make any excuses for myself. My past behaviors were wrong and unacceptable. I want to own those actions, and I am sorry for the hurt that I have caused Melissa and the pain that I put her through, and I am trying my best efforts to become a better person.
Now, surprisingly, Russell would return to the field in 2019, but after yet another disappointing season, it was clear that he had no future in MLB. Sure enough, he was released by the Cubs in December and had no luck finding another team. So, in an attempt to revitalize his career, he signed a deal to play in Korea in 2020. Although, after hitting just 2 home runs in 65 games, his team decided to let him go at the end of the year. Since then, Russell has played for teams in both Mexico and the Dominican Republic, and in 2025, he re-signed with a team in the Mexican League. Nonetheless, Russell will likely never return to MLB, and at this point, his name is almost entirely forgotten by most fans. But what happens when a 6-time All-Star is forced to retire at just 32 years old? Prince Fielder was one of the greatest power hitters in baseball during his peak. When he was just 23 years old, he became the youngest player in National League history to hit 50 home runs in a single season. So it's no surprise that he also managed to become a 2-time winner of the Home Run Derby. But don't get it twisted, his power was not his only strength, as from 2008 to 2013, he drew the most walks of any player in MLB. But despite being a fan favorite with incredible achievements, there's a few reasons why Fielder isn't talked about as much today. Ever since he was a kid, Fielder was surrounded by baseball. You see, his father, Cecil, had played in MLB for 13 years, hitting over 300 home runs during his career. So naturally, the young prince picked up on those same skills. At just 18 years old, he was selected 7th overall by Milwaukee in the 2002 MLB draft, although he wouldn't start drawing attention until 5 years later in 2007. At 23 years old, Fielder would quickly emerge as one of the best hitters in the league, hitting 50 home runs with an OPS over 1,000. And it was because of this dominance that he was selected as the starting first baseman in the All-Star game. But somehow, this was merely the beginning, as in 2009, he would have what is arguably his best season ever, hitting 46 home runs and leading MLB in RBIs. This was also the year that Fielder would win his first home run derby, outshining stars like Nelson Cruz and Albert Pujols. Fielder was quickly becoming a fan favorite, and in 2011, he would sign a massive contract with the Tigers worth $214 million. But this deal didn't come without criticism. Over the years, Fielder's steadily increasing weight led to concerns about his health and future performance. Not to mention, both his speed and defense were well below average, meaning that almost all of his value came from his offense. However, at least at first, none of these concerns seemed to be an issue. In the first 2 years of his new contract, he became an All-Star both times, and helped his team make deep runs in the postseason. So with that, any doubts surrounding Fielder had pretty much disappeared. From 2009 to 2013, he was surprisingly the most durable player in baseball, only missing a single game in 5 years. And during that span, he was objectively one of the best all-around hitters in the game, ranking 3rd in home runs and 2nd in walks. However, despite his success, the Tigers would need to free up money heading into 2014, and just 2 years into a 9-year deal, Fielder was traded to the Rangers. And it was in Texas that his career would quickly go downhill. In 2014, he was forced to undergo surgery due to a serious neck injury, and despite making a comeback in 2015, the pain would resurface in 2016, leading to yet another surgery. So, left with no other choice, Fielder would make a shocking announcement in August of that year.
The doctors told me since, 2 spinal fusions. I gotta, can't play Major League Baseball anymore. I just been in the big league clubhouse since I was, their age. So it's, to not be able to play is gonna be tough.
Fielder was devastated, as just like that, his career had come to an end at only 32 years old. After all, if it weren't for the injuries, he had the potential to end up in the Hall of Fame. But now, he's simply looked at as a what if, and most fans tend to forget just how good he was during his peak. Following his retirement, Fielder has continued to remain a part of the community. Over the years, he's made a few appearances on MLB Network, and in 2024, he was the hitting coach for the MLB Futures game. Most importantly, however, he's embraced his role as a father, with 2 sons that are currently following in his footsteps. In fact, his oldest son, Jaden, actually signed with the Brewers in 2024, and is entering his first season of professional baseball in 2025. So, even though his time on the field was cut short, Prince Fielder still managed to have a great career and is still involved with MLB to this day. But the same cannot be said about this next player, a 4-time All-Star who completely destroyed his career overnight. Throughout the 2010s, there were only 3 players with more hits than Starlin Castro. Now, Castro never had much power, but he made up for it by consistently putting the ball in play. And for a while, he was one of the most promising young stars in all of baseball. In 2010, Castro had an impressive debut with the Cubs, hitting a home run in his very first at-bat and later adding a triple. In his second season, he led the National League in hits with 207, becoming the youngest player to do so in history. However, despite his significant contributions at the plate, Castro's defense was a major liability. Starting in 2011, he committed the most errors of any shortstop in baseball for 3 years straight. And according to the Cubs manager, it was simply due to a lack of focus. Nonetheless, Castro continued to find success thanks to his production at the plate. Over the years, he would pick up 3 All-Star nominations in his time with the Cubs, before being passed around to the Yankees, the Marlins, and finally the Nationals. You see, after leaving Chicago, his performance would steadily decline year after year, and by 2021, he was no longer the All-Star level player that he once was. But still, he was only 31 years old, and nobody could have predicted that just a few months later, his career would suddenly come to an end. In July of 2021, it was announced that Castro had been suspended for 30 days after violating MLB's domestic violence policy. Now, there's not many details about what he actually did, but we did get a statement from MLB's commissioner regarding the situation. Having reviewed all the available evidence, I have concluded that Mr. Castro violated our policy and that discipline is appropriate. So, shortly after, Castro was released by the Nationals, and he hasn't played in MLB since. In 2022, he signed with the team in the Mexican League, but only ended up playing in 28 games. As of 2025, Castro is currently a free agent, but at 34 years old, a return to MLB is not likely. So now, he's just another name that will likely be forgotten. But maybe the greatest forgotten player of the 2010s is Josh Hamilton, whose career was derailed by drugs and injuries. So if you want to learn more about his insane story, check out the video on your screen.